Your Highness, Minister Joly, Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me begin by thanking His Highness for that stirring message about this place and about pluralism in the world. And as I was listening to those remarks, I was thinking of the revitalization of this place and this building. Here we are on the opening of the Center for Pluralism. And this building has come from the War Museum. This is a wonderful application of that statement from the Bible, swords into plowshares. Isn't that fascinating? Swords into plowshares. And of course, the earlier iteration of this building was the Dominion Archives and Library of Canada, where we began to collect our history, our civilization, so that we would remember and respect our past to prepare for our future. And that too has been revitalized in this wonderful Center for Pluralism, which reminds me of one of my favorite metaphors. It's Jefferson's candle, and the light reflects knowledge. That candle is on my coat of arms. And Jefferson once said, "When you light your unlit candle from my lit candle, my light is not diminished, it is enhanced." And what we see here, of course, is a great opportunity of a candle of light to the world with a épanouissement, with the extension of the message of pluralism around the world. The world is my country. The human race is my race. Those are the words of Canadian poet and lawyer Frank Scott from his great poem, Creed. I do believe those words capture something of the creed of this Global Center for Pluralism. The world is your country. The human race is your race. Le monde est votre pays. La race humaine est votre race. Ce sont ces paroles qui guident le Centre mondial de pluralisme. I've had the pleasure of hosting a number of you who serve on the Center's board at Rideau Hall several times during my mandate, and I'm so inspired by what all of you are achieving here. The Center truly is a beacon of internationalism and humanism, and it shines brightly. A special thank you to His Highness, that great Canadian friend and honorary citizen, for showing such dedication to pluralism and to strengthening Canada's commitment to and leadership of this issue for the world. Your Highness, establishing this center in our capital city at this confluence of North America is a wonderful gift to Canada. I often speak, as you have, of the importance of knowledge diplomacy in our world, which I define simply as the process by which distinct peoples and cultures improve lives by sharing knowledge across borders and disciplines. Jefferson's candle. La diplomatie de savoir est un processus où les peuples et les cultures se rencontrent et vont au-delà des frontières et des disciplines. L'Aga Khan pratique bien la diplomatie de savoir. The Aga Khan is a wise practitioner of this brand of diplomacy. He appreciates that the success of our increasingly interdependent world is based on people of many faiths, cultures, and values, expressing tolerance, openness, and understanding towards others. And as you were making that comment, I thought of that lovely phrase from Saint-Exupéry's book. I think it was Le Petit Prince, who said, "I am different from you, but because I am different, I do not diminish you, I enrich in you." The depth of His Highness's commitment to diplomacy and pluralism is quite simply profound. I know this from personal experience. We first met at another official opening 36 years ago in Karachi, Pakistan. The details may differ, but the underlying theme is the same: diverse people working together to improve lives. I was serving as principal of McGill at the time, and I had the privilege of being present at the birth of an earlier wonderful partnership, this one between the Aga Khan University, the newly formed Aga Khan University, and a number of North American universities which we were privileged at McGill to be a part of. This partnership saw our renowned epidemiologist Walter Spitzer and his team working closely with their Pakistani counterparts to share McGill's lessons learned in establishing a successful community medicine model, medicine taken from the great hospital, from the great centers, into the rural community and touching people very directly. Thanks to this collaboration, the new Aga Khan University Hospital was able to build on and with McGill's experience in deploying public health services in the community, and a wonderful opportunity to spread that throughout the world. At that time I was, and today I remain, so greatly impressed by the boldness of that initiative. The goal was ambitious: bring the best of Western medicine to a country with its distinct customs and traditions. One of the most interesting parts of it was the nursing school, and with a partnership with McMaster University, with a marvelous dean who came from McMaster. And they had the very interesting cultural challenge, you remember, Your Highness, of educating young women to become nurses at a time when the culture was that women did not treat male patients in their communities. And that was overcome. This goal was only achieved by showing a great deal of cultural sensitivity. In essence, this is the challenge of pluralism. How do we ensure respect for diversity while sharing ideas and resources to improve our lives and societies? Well, your mission at the Global Center for Pluralism is to advance respect for diversity as a new global ethic and a foundation for inclusive citizenship. Ce centre est un lieu d'apprentissage qui met en commune les enseignements tirés du pluralisme, et ce, d'un point de vue canadien. I'd like to say just a few words about the importance of that mission, as well as Canada's unique opportunity to lead. First, why does pluralism matter? And we heard some fascinating answers a moment ago on the video. Well, I think the answer is as straightforward as it is urgent. Pluralism is critical to the long-term peace and prosperity of societies worldwide. Sans engagement envers le pluralisme, la diversité risque de se transformer trop facilement en source de conflit et de division. Too often we've seen conflicts and that division occur because of a lack of commitment to pluralism. So, what do? Well, we develop a narrative and approaches that ensure diversity is properly understood as a source of strength and prosperity. In other words, we need to develop and tell a compelling story, and we need ideas and plans for action to allow that story to unfold. If diversity is to be an asset and not a liability, we must allow diverse peoples to reach their full potential and to contribute as full and equal partners in our society. We must empower people to succeed. In other words, we must be inclusive. Louise Arbour a parlé récemment de son nouveau poste de représentante spéciale du secrétaire général des Nations Unies pour la migration internationale. Elle insiste sur l'importance d'une nouvelle approche en matière de pluralisme. En entrevue, elle disait: il faut changer le discours qui exagère le prétendu fardeau de la migration pour mettre en évidence tous les bienfaits que le pays en a tirés. Pluralism will succeed if we're able to tell the most convincing story. And why is that? Well, because a good story is more than just words. A good story both reflects and creates a reality. A good story can help us to reimagine our lives in society, to imagine possibilities. And a good story can guide us toward taking right actions for change, actions that are consistent with our story. Well, let me tell you one recent story that comes out of Canada's response to the Syrian refugee crisis, especially that of private citizens. As many of you know, Canada's response to the Syrian refugee crisis, for me, was very heartening because it was not simply government-led, and it was well led by government, but it reached into the most fundamental values of Canadian to reach out to neighbors and newly arriving neighbors as barn raisers. There's a great Canadian custom of when a newcomer arrives in a rural community, everybody on enough Saturdays to do the job comes and raises the barn. And when a barn burns down, the neighbors come together to help rebuild the barn. The story for me is very personal because before this job, we lived in Waterloo, where I was at the local university, and our home was 10 minutes away. And it was a farm, 100 acres, and our neighbors were all Mennonite farmers, horse and buggy people, no cars and trucks. And they were marvelous. And they were barn raisers. And my wife ran a stable operation with 36 horses, very difficult to run on a break-even basis. the insurance broker said, well, let's look at your insurance and let's be sure you're well insured but not overinsured. So she was doing the valuation of the properties, and our neighbor, Edgar Shantz, who leased our land, marvelous man, was there. And she said, Edgar, what value would you put on the barn? We've got $75,000 on the barn. He said, well, why do you need to value the barn? She said, well, Edgar, we need to insure it. Why do you need to insure it? Well, if it burned down, we'd have to replace it. He said, if it burned down, we'd replace it. He said, yes, you know, if it burned down, we'd come immediately to help put out the fire, and then we'd clear the debris, and then with whatever number of Saturdays it would take, we'd come and rebuild it. And we have small lumber mills on our properties. We always keep the forest, and we'd bring the wood. He said, the asphalt shingles, we don't make asphalt shingles. You don't need a tin roof there. He said, you better put $500 on it to cover the asphalt shingles. I'm diverging because I wanted to speak about refugees, but that image of barn raising was so clear in my mind I had to get it out. We had a summit of the stakeholders of various communities working on welcoming into our communities as private citizen-sponsored refugees. And then we were in several villages, towns, cities across the country celebrating and bringing together the local people who had come together to welcome Syrian refugee families, about 45,000 over the past 15 months or so. And we're in Oakville, middle-sized community, gathering of 500 people who were all engaged as citizens, private citizens, to welcome Syrian families into their family. And the meeting began with a blessing given by an Anglican minister, Protestant minister, a Roman Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and an imam from the local mosque. And after they gave the blessing, I came and I said, you know, it's wonderful to see those four religious traditions opening our meeting, but they've come together in another way. The congregation of their four churches, synagogues, mosques, etc., have sponsored 3 refugee families. And I don't mean they've kind of divided the check up 3/4 of one family for each. Together, not simply with money, but with all the support services, those 4 congregations have supported 3 refugee families. Now, just think of that interesting collaboration, those 4 traditions coming together and welcoming those new families into Canada. Here in Canada, when we look around for this pluralism story and listen for it, we begin to realize that, in fact, it isn't a new story that we need. It's a very old one that continues to unfold. It's a story of partnership, balanced, reciprocal, and respectful. And this old story predates Canada itself to at least the time of the Royal Proclamation in 1763, John, which you've reminded us about often, which laid the basis for the treaty relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Cette année marque le 150e anniversaire du Canada. Mais comme la Commission royale sur les peuples autochtones nous l'a rappelé il y a quart de siècle, c'est avec les Premières Nations qu'il faut négocier la première forme d'entente confédérative. The first confederal bargain with First Nations recognized. We must work together if we are to survive and thrive in this vast and challenging land. And it saw several fundamental truths begin to be enshrined in law. We're all here to stay, and we're better off as partners. These truths, that story, are the beating heart of our modern pluralistic society. We should listen to it. And here are the Confederation debates taking place in the colonial legislatures and the homes and gathering places of ordinary people in the years prior to 1867. We should listen to it and hear more than 200 languages from around the world spoken today in Canada, and the estimated 65 Aboriginal languages spoken in Canada. We should listen to it and hear the call to action. Canada has an opportunity, a responsibility perhaps, to demonstrate how pluralism is a viable and perhaps the only path to lasting peace and prosperity. So what is this confederation if not an exercise in pluralism amongst diverse peoples? Certains jugent parfois que l'engagement en faveur de la diversité n'est qu'un idéalisme utopique. C'est tout le contraire. Dans un univers hétérogène, mondialisé et technologique, rien n'est plus pragmatique qu'une société qui est inclusive et pluraliste. Diversity helps us to enrich our society. That's the great Canadian statement. to better understand other countries and to forge connections with people around the planet. I don't need to tell you we have no reason for complacency here in Canada. Terrible, violent rejections of pluralism can and do happen here. But where Canada has failed in the past, for example, the disastrous residential schools policy, it has been in trying to reduce diversity and restrict inclusiveness. And where Canada has succeeded, it has been through a commitment to inclusiveness, to pluralism. La société canadienne est à son meilleur lorsqu'elle reflète sa géographie vaste, immense, et diversifiée. Canada is a constantly evolving experiment. It's a social experiment. It's a social innovation. And it's a bit challenging because it's an experiment in inclusiveness and making pluralism work. And this is what positions us to help to tell the pluralism story, not just here in Canada, but around the world. And Your Highness, that's why your work in the Global Centre for Pluralism is so essential both for the Canadian experiment and for our capacity for people everywhere to live with difference, to live pluralism. I want to end with a personal story. I've reached the age where, one, I enjoy telling stories, and my wife says you go on too long. And two, where I really do see the world through the eyes of my children, 5 daughters, and my grandchildren, 14. And I say with sincerity that all the important things in life I've learned from my children, and I'm now relearning from my grandchildren. Our daughters grew up in a comfortable home, 5 of them, and thanks to their church and thanks to the experiences of volunteer activities, they were exposed to difference fairly early on. And at age 12, they began international exchanges. I could go on about the importance of that exposure, but let me just say, I watched 4 things happen to my daughters through the exposure to difference in their own communities, particularly hardship, and through the international experiences in many different countries around the world. The first thing is their natural curiosity was enhanced. Children are all curious. Their curiosity became a kind of more penetrating one. Secondly, they became more tolerant, not tolerant just in the sense of, I am different from you and you are different from me, but that's okay, nobody gets hurt. But why is that difference, and what is there about that difference, and what's the particular allure of that difference? So that tolerance had a capital T to it. Thirdly, their judgment became better. They were really quick to spot bigotry. They always looked for the other side of the story. They would often hesitate before coming to a conclusion until they'd gathered a little more evidence, that they triangulated on the problem and saw it from a different angle. Mathematical, but very useful in human applications. But most important of all, they became more empathetic, not just sympathetic, but empathetic. They could walk in the shoes of the other person. I wish you the very best in your magnificent quest and in your beautiful new home here in Canada and for the world. Merci.